The Zod 500 presents Canadian Elections of History! The first election in Canadian history happened between August 7th and September 20th, 1867, where there were three major party candidates. There was the leader of the Conservative Party, John A. Macdonald, the leader of the Liberal Party, George Brown, which was an unofficial leader, and the leader of the Anti-Confederation Party, Joseph Howe. For this election, there was 181 seats in the House of Commons, but to win the majority, you needed 91 seats to become the first Prime Minister of the newly found nation. Remember, back then, Canada only had 4 provinces: Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Ontario, and it was just a little tiny bit of Ontario, about maybe 1/3 of Quebec, and the entire province of New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. John A. Macdonald got the leader's seat from Kingston, while George Brown, the unofficial leader of the Liberal Party, got the leader's seat in Ontario South, but he did lose. And then the Anti-Confederation Party's leader, Joseph Howe, ran and got the leader's seat in Hants. With all of that said, let's get into the results. This election had 74.3% voter turnout, and it had 361,028 registered votes. So, with 93,412 votes and 34.8% of the popular votes, and 100 seats won, which means he would become the next Prime Minister, the first Prime Minister of Canada would be Sir John A. Macdonald, with 100 seats won, 93,412 votes, and 34.8% of the popular vote. George Brown, the unofficial leader of the Liberal Party, got 62 seats won, with 60,818 votes and 22.7% of the popular vote, while the Anti-Confederation Joseph Howe, he got 18 seats won, 21,239 votes, and 7.9% of the popular vote. And I'll see you guys for the election of 1872. The Zod 500 presents Canadian Elections of History! The second election in Canadian history happened between July 20th and October 12th, 1872. In this election, unlike the one that happened 5 years prior, there were only 2 parties in this one. Edward Brake, the unofficial leader of the Liberal Party, and John A. Macdonald, the leader of the Conservative Party. Since the last election, the nation had grown a little bit, gaining a little bit more territory in Ontario, a tiny little square thingy in Manitoba, and the entire province, or now province at least, of British Columbia. But now let's talk about the interesting stuff. How many seats in the House of Commons, and how many seats needed to get the majority. Going from the last election, there was 181 seats in the House of Commons, but just 5 years later, that grew 19 more. There are now 200 seats in the House of Commons for the 1872 Canadian election. But to win, you need 101 seats to get the majority. We still need to introduce our candidates just a little bit more before we could actually dive into what we were just talking about here. So, John A. Macdonald, of course, the Conservative leader, has been the leader of the country since 1867 and got the leader's seat from Kingston. Edward Blake, the, of course, unofficial leader of the Liberal Party, was never leader, of course, and got the leader's seat from Bruce South. And now, with that said, now we could finally get in to see who won this election. Okay, now let's get into it. There was a 70.3% voter turnout, which was just 0.1% lower than the election of 1867. But with that said, there were still some people who actually decided that it was a good idea to vote. So, we're going to care about those people. In this election, there were 5 votes that went to other seats, which means that the winner could not get a total of 101 seats. So the winner actually got 100 seats, which was the same amount that Sir John A. Macdonald got in the election of 1867. Did he get it this time? Well, the answer is yes, he did. He won the election and became the re-elected Prime Minister of the Dominion of Canada. So with that, I'll see you for the election of 1874. Tazod 500 presents Canadian Elections of History! Similar to the election that happened 2 years before, there only was 2 major party candidates for the election of 1872. There was Alexander Mackenzie, which was the official finally leader of the Liberal Party, and John A. Macdonald, again, the leader of the Conservative Party. Now you may be asking yourself, how is that possible? Because you're only allowed to serve for 2 terms and 2 attempts. Well, actually, it's a bit different in Canada from the United States, because in the United States, that is an official law where you could only run twice. But in Canada, there is no limit on how much you can run. So John A. Macdonald, in this instance, was allowed to run for a 3rd term in public office. Unlike just 2 years prior, there was no changes to the Canadian map for this election, so we don't have to worry about any extra provinces or area to the Canadian country. We've gone over this a million times, but in case you did miss the first 2 episodes on the series, John A. Macdonald got the leader seat from Kingston. We've said this 3 times now, but John A. Macdonald did get the leader seat from Kingston. But we do also have another candidate here, Alexander Mackenzie, the leader of the Liberal Party. Where did he get his leader's seat from? The answer there would be Lambton. Let's get into the interesting stuff now. How many seats were there in the House of Commons? For this election, there are 206 seats up for grabs in the House of Commons. But 104 seats are just needed for a majority. John A. Macdonald has been leader of the country, of course, since July 1st, 1867, and Alexander Mackenzie have been leader of the Liberal Party since March 6th, 1873. Compared to the last election, however, there was way less voter turnout, with only 69.6% voter turnout, which I guess is still not that good, but it's still significantly less than the election of 1872. But with that said, let's get into the interesting stuff. So, with 128,455 of the popular votes in the popular vote, and 39.5% of the popular vote percentage, the new Prime Minister of the Dominion of Canada is either going to be re-elected John A. Macdonald or the new Prime Minister, Alexander Mackenzie. And with the stats I just mentioned, and 129 seats won, becoming the next Prime Minister, would be Alexander Mackenzie, and he would take office for the next, to become Prime Minister. So with that, I'll see you for the election of 1878. The Zod 500 presents Canadian Elections of History! The 4th election in Canadian history happened between September 17th, 1878 and September 18th, 1878, where there were 2 major party candidates. There was the leader of the Conservative Party, John A. Macdonald, yes, he's back, and Alexander Mackenzie, the leader of the Liberal Party. John A. Macdonald, of course, was the leader since 1867 of the Conservative Party, while Mackenzie was the leader of the Liberal Party since 1873. This time, though, John A. Macdonald got the leader seat from Victoria, and Alexander Mackenzie still got his leader seat from Lambton. By now, Canada has expanded a little bit. a little bit more territory in Quebec, and a little bit more territory in Ontario. And the little square thing in Manitoba, well, it grew just a bit. Let's get into the interesting stuff, though. There were 206 seats in the House of Commons, and 104 seats were needed for a majority to win the 1878 Canadian election. Of course, the members of each party, John A. Macdonald and Alexander Mackenzie, if you didn't watch last episode, John A. Macdonald got 65 seats and Alexander Mackenzie got 129. But this time, there was a change. With 229,191 votes in the popular vote and 42.06% of it, and 134 seats won, the next Prime Minister of Canada would be John A. Macdonald, as he got re-elected, and Alexander Mackenzie would be leaving office. And I'll see you for the election of 1882. The Zod 500 presents Canadian Elections of History! This election, the fifth in Canadian history, was actually a rematch of the election of 1872, where we had... let's get into the date first. This happened on June 20th, 1882. And, well, now we can get into the parties. If you don't remember my 1872 video, there was the Conservative leader, John A. Macdonald, who has been just really trying to win for every single election. Like, every single video we've included this guy. And then there's Edward Blake, the leader, finally official, of the Liberal Party, which he's been leader since 1880, so it only been 2 years since that. And the map has grown a little bit more territory in Quebec, and the square thing from Manitoba grew a little bit more. And there was, disputed territory. There was disputed territory in, I believe, modern-day Manitoba and Ontario, but it didn't really matter for this election because as it was disputed, it didn't vote. Let's get into the interesting stuff, though. How many seats were there in the House of Commons? For this election, there was 211 seats in the House of Commons. Anyone that knows or is good at math will know that there are 106 seats needed to become Prime Minister. Before we actually get into who won, let's see where they got their leader's seat from. Well, John A. Macdonald, he got his from Carleton, which was third in 5 elections. And then Edward Blake in Durham West. And to be honest, I don't really remember if that was the same as last time or not. So, with a 70.3% voter turnout, 133 seats won, 208,544 votes, and 40.4% of the popular vote. The winner of the 1882 Canadian federal election would be John A. Macdonald, and he gets a 4th term in office. And I'll see you guys for the election of 1887. The Zod 500 presents Canadian Elections of History! Just like in the last election, we had the exact same candidates. We had the Liberal leader, Edward Blake, and the Conservative leader, John A. Macdonald. And for the map, it grew quite a bit, gaining lots of territory in the north, and all that's left to gain from modern day would be this little gray area or in the middle here. And by the way, it may look like this is an election map, which by the way, it isn't. It may look like one, but it actually is not a map of the actual election. It is a fantasy map that I've gotten online. For this election, there were of course 2 candidates, which means 2 leader seat. And the one where John A. Macdonald got his leader seat was actually in Kingston again. And for Edward Blake, for the 3rd time actually, he got his seat there in Durham West. If you watched my last video, you would know when these candidates got their leader since from. But since I know everyone didn't watch it from this video, I'll go ahead and tell you again, but I'd like for you to watch the last video anyways. It's in a playlist. John A. Macdonald, of course, was the leader of the Conservative Party ever since the country was formed in 1867, and Edward Blake was the official leader of the Liberal Party since 1880, which is kind of insane. Let's get into the epically insane stuff now. And if that's not a thing, I just made it a thing right now. So there are 215 seats in the House of Commons this time, and there are 108 seats needed to become Prime Minister of Canada in this one. And, well, you need 108 seats to win. But let's mention the other stats so that you don't get the results spoiled. So, with 343,805 votes, 47.4% of the popular vote, which is actually really close to the second place candidate's 43.1%, and with 123 seats, the next Prime Minister of Canada would be John A. Macdonald, who won another term in office. Seriously, this guy just won't quit. And I'll see you guys for the election of 1891. The Zod 500 presents Canadian Elections of History. The election of 1891 was held on March 5th, 1891, where there were 2 major party candidates. These would be the party leader of the Conservative Party, Sir John A. Macdonald, and the leader of the Liberal Party, Wilfrid Laurier. John A. Macdonald's been leader of the Conservative Party and, of course, as well, the country since 1867, and Wilfrid Laurier has been leader of the Liberal Party since 1887. Just in time for this election, the map grew a bit with more territory in Ontario, but that's just about it. And of course, the disputed territory was settled in Canada's favor, I guess. And now all we have left is this random territory in the middle of the country. Okay, so where did each candidate get their leader seat from? John A. Macdonald got their leader seat from Kingston, once again, and Wilfrid Laurier got it from Quebec East. Although Wilfrid Laurier also ran in Richmond Wolfe, in which he was defeated in. For this election, there was 215 seats in the House of Commons, meaning that there were 108 seats needed for a majority. This election had the least amount of turnout from the elections we've covered so far, with only 64.4% turnout. So let's get into the interesting stuff now. So, of course, with 108 seats needed to win, the winner got 376,518 votes and 48.6% of the popular vote. And the winner, with 117 seats won, the Prime Minister of Canada would be John A. Macdonald, who won yet another term in office again. However, tragically, John A. Macdonald in May of 1891 would suffer a stroke which left him partially paralyzed and unable to speak. His health continued to deteriorate, and he died on the late evening of June 6, 1891, which led John Abbott into the prime ministership. The year after John A. Macdonald would die, though, Alexander Mackenzie would also die in 1892. Unfortunately, however, John Abbott wouldn't even make it to the next election, as he too would die in November of 1892. So he was replaced by John Sparrow David Thompson, who would die in 1894, not even making it to the next election. He was replaced by Mackenzie Bowell, who would make it to the next election. While Mackenzie Bowell did make it to the next election, he wasn't actually a part of it because he resigned on April 27, 1896. His replacement would be Charles Tupper, which did make it to the next election. So after all that craziness, I'll see you guys for the election of 1896. The Zod 500 presents Canadian Elections of History. The eighth election in Canadian history happened on June 23rd, 1896, where there were two major party candidates. There was the incumbent Conservative Party, a leader, Charles Tupper, which got the leader since in 1896 when Mackenzie Bowell resigned, and Wilfrid Laurier, the leader of the Liberal Party, who's been leader since 1887 and has hit his try in 1891 by losing to Sir John A. Macdonald. In this election, the map didn't really change much. Just the expansion of the District of Queensland, just a little bit more to the right, stranding into Ontario territory, but really nobody lived there anyways, and nobody lives there today anyways, so it's kind of fine anyways. The incumbent Charles Tupper got his leader's seat from Cape Breton, but Wilfrid Laurier got his leader's seat from Quebec East. Laurier was also elected in Saskatchewan Provincial District, but he chose to sit for Quebec East instead and resigned as the Member of Parliament for Saskatchewan Provincial District. Now let's get into the epically insane stuff. That's a new thing now. So, for this election, there were 213 seats in the House of Commons. And any of the folks that are good at math here, unlike me, know that there's 107 seats needed for a majority. So who won? Well, that's actually what we're going to touch on right now. For this election, there was only a 62.9% voter turnout, which is one of the least we've had so far in this series. We've had 401,425 votes go to the winner. Actually, he lost the popular vote. Yeah, the winner of the popular vote lost the election. You're going to find out who that was. And the winner of the popular vote, but the loser of the election, got 48.2% to the loser, but also the winner of the election, 41.4%. But that's all that matters here is the seats. And with 117 seats, which means he would become prime minister, or in Charles Tupper's case, would get reelected, the winner was Wilfrid Laurier, which means that Laurier became the first prime minister in Canadian history to win but have less votes than the opposition, which is just absolutely insane. After this, the House of Commons was questioned quite a bit, but not as much after the 1876 election in the United States.